Welcome back to the deep dive. We grab your stack of sources, extract the key knowledge, and we'll get you informed fast. Today, we are strapping ourselves into a piece of gear that really, it just transcended the whole category of a simple effect pedal. It basically became an instrument. We're talking about the Electro Harmonix POG2. That's the Polyphonic Octave Generator 2. So if you're looking for that quick, essential understanding of how this digital marvel really achieved professional status, almost synthesizer status, and maybe why it still defines so many modern ambient and experimental guitar tones, well, you've come to the right place. We're not just talking about, what it does, but really how its specific design fundamentally changed what the electric guitar could do. Okay, let's unpack this then.
Yeah, and to really get the POG2, you kind of have to look back a bit. When it came out in 2009, it was definitely standing on the shoulders of the original POG, which was, 4 years earlier, 2005. And that original POG, back then, it was just an absolute revelation. Because, up until that point, trying to shift octaves, especially digitally, it was just plagued by terrible tracking, and these ugly, unstable glitches. The second you tried to play more than one note, a chord, forget it.
Right. Yeah, those old monophonic octave pedals were around, sure. But try playing like a C major chord on one. It just fell apart into this digital noise soup. The original POG basically proved robust digital polyphonic octave generation was actually possible without all that mess.
Exactly. It was a real digital watershed moment, you could say. And the POG2, it didn't just copy that. It took that glitch-free core technology and then surrounded it with features that pretty clearly signaled, okay, this isn't just a niche effect anymore. This was aimed at being a proper professional performance tool. It effectively bridged that whole gap between your standard kind of limited stomp box and, a dedicated digital synthesizer.
And that transformation, it really comes down to the internal architecture, right? It's not just another digital chorus or delay box. There's a complex DSP engine in there.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating here is the sheer processing power needed inside that digital signal processing core. It's quite an advanced system. It's designed not just to track your initial pitch perfectly, which is hard enough with chords, but then to mathematically duplicate it multiple times and maintain crystal clear separation across, 4 separate synthesized voices simultaneously. And it has to do all that in real time with basically no latency, even on complex harmonic-rich guitar chords. That's polyphonic mastery, really.
And the interface, those sliders, they immediately tell you you're dealing with something more powerful, right? You're not just stomping a button, you feel like you're mixing. You've got those 5 main voices controlled by the vertical sliders, which were very visible on that original big enclosure.
Precisely. Those 5 let you dial in your original guitar sound, the dry signal slider, and then you blend in 4 synthesized voices completely independently. You've got the sub-octave 1 = 1, the really deep octave down in Eckes 2, then the bright octave up, +1, and that super high kind of shimmering octave up, +2, that full range, 2 octaves up, 2 octaves down. That's what gives it that huge, almost pipe organ feel.
Okay, I have to jump in here, though, because the sources really highlight a specific technical point. The POG2 needs an 18-volt DC power adapter. Now, wait, why not just the standard 9-volt, almost every other pedal uses? Doesn't that make it kind of a pain for your pedal board setup, less portable?
That's a real good question, and actually it speaks volumes about EHX's priorities back then. They were choosing sound quality over maybe pure convenience. The 18-volt requirement is purely about achieving maximum headroom. See, when you're stacking 4 digital voices plus your dry signal, and then maybe running that through its internal delay and filtering, the summed output signal becomes incredibly complex, very energetic. If you try to cram that massive signal through a standard 9-volt circuit, you're going to hit voltage clipping almost immediately. And that results in harsh, nasty digital distortion or just noise. Doubling the voltage gives you double the headroom. It basically ensures that even when you slam all 5 voice sliders to the max and hit a big chord, those complex digital signals stay clean, clear, pristine. No unwanted noise. It was a necessary trade-off if you wanted that professional clarity.
Okay, that makes sense. That focus on clean power for complex digital stuff really shows they were aiming it at pros, not just casual players. So we've got the core voices, that ability to stack polyphony cleanly. But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. What truly took the POG2 from being just a great pitch shifter to being this, synthesizer emulator.
Right.
It's those 3 additional modulation and shaping controls, right? These feel like the secret ingredients that let you kind of fake those analog synth sounds.
Absolutely, yeah. The voices give you the notes, the substance, but these 3 features, they provide the character, the soul. Let's start with the attack delay. This control is just fundamental if you want to turn a plucked guitar string sound into something more like a keyboard. See, when you play a guitar normally, you get that really sharp initial transient, the sound of the pick hitting the string, right? That's unmistakably guitar. A tactile controls how quickly the synthesized octave notes fade in. It effectively lets you mute or soften that initial pick attack.
Ah, okay. So by turning up the attack delay, you're basically telling the pedal, hey, don't sound like a guitar string being hit hard. Sound more like a key being pressed down slowly, or maybe like a violin string being bowed where the sound swells in.
Precisely. You get rid of that sharp transient, and the note just swells in gradually. And that's how you get those huge, lush, massive organ pads or string section style sounds. Without that attack control, it just wouldn't work for ambient or synth emulation. It would still sound too much like a guitar.
Okay, cool. Next up, we have detune. This one seems a bit more subtle, but still essential for adding richness.
Yeah, detune is subtle, but crucial. It introduces just a tiny bit of pitch modulation, a slight wavering or movement. It creates that classic chorus-like shimmer effect. Think about a real pipe organ, right? No two pipes are ever perfectly in tune. And that slight natural variation between them is what gives the organ its thick, sort of swirling character. Detune emulates that kind of organic inconsistency. So when you stack those octave-up voices, especially the +1 and +2, and then you add just a hint of detune, the sound becomes incredibly thick and wide, really dimensional. It's not like a heavy, wobbly vibrato. It just subtly thickens the air around the notes,
Yeah, like stepping into a big hall or something. It adds space. And finally, the low-pass filter. Okay, this one seems like a non-negotiable if you're trying to mimic analog instruments.
That's exactly right. Digital pitch shifting, especially back then, could often sound a bit harsh or sterile. The upper harmonics generated digitally can be kind of sharp, maybe squared off, a little bit buzzy sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to replicate the rich, creamy warmth of, say, a Hammond organ or an old vintage analog synth, you absolutely need to tame that digital top-end sizzle. The low-pass filter lets you roll off those potentially harsh high frequencies. It smooths out the harmonics. It basically turns what could be a sharp, slightly buzzy digital voice into a much richer, rounded, more genuine-sounding organ tone. It's really the texture control.
Got it. And crucially, all these sophisticated sound shaping tools were paired with something essential for playing live.
Yeah.
Actual stage readiness. I mean, all that amazing sound sculpting would be pretty useless if you had to bend down and fiddle with, 9 different sliders between every single song?
Exactly. And that's why the inclusion of 8 onboard memory slots for saving and recalling presets, that's what really defined the POG2's professional status at the time. For a digital stompbox in that era, maybe late 2000s, having presets was huge. It made it intuitive, practical for live performance. The difference for a pro isn't just being able to create complex sounds, it's being able to recall them instantly, reliably, under pressure on a dark stage.
Right. The presets made it usable live. But what kinds of sounds actually made people want to take it on stage? Let's maybe walk through some of the specific sounds the POG2 is famous for.
Well, obviously, the organ tones have to be first. By stacking those up and down octaves, maybe using that low-pass filter for warmth, dialing in some attack delay, you suddenly stop sounding like you're playing guitar, and you're playing something like a full church organ, or a rich, swirling Hammond B3 sound, maybe without the Leslie complexity, but the core tone. And if you push that attack delay further, it transitions smoothly into these lush strings and synths. It's perfect if you need like a non-percussive background synth pad or maybe a violin-like sound that just swells dramatically into the mix behind everything else. You can fill huge sonic spaces very easily.
But I think maybe the most ingenious use, for me anyway, is the 12-string emulation. Combining that subtle detune feature, specifically with the octave-up voices, creates this remarkably realistic double-string shimmer. It simulates the effect of those doubled strings on a real 12-string being just ever so slightly out of tune or out of phase with each other. It gives you that chiming, really full acoustic feel, but from your regular electric guitar with just a tap of the foot switch. Pretty cool.
Definitely. And then conversely, down on the low end, those deep sub-octaves, the -1 and especially the -2, they make guitarists could realistically emulate bass lines. Think about looping musicians or maybe just two-piece bands. The POG2 could drop the guitar signal way down, adding serious weight and definition. It let the guitarist cover the low end live.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think its overall versatility in just creating these layered, sustained textures The organ swells, the stacked harmonics, the shimmer from the detune, it just made it an instant, almost indispensable tool in post-rock and ambient music, especially shoegaze, right? Where those massive layered soundscapes are, like the whole point.
And you definitely see that reflected consistently in who uses it. Jack White, for instance, he's famous for using the POG family, often pairing it with fuzz, right? To create those really distinctive, sometimes abrasive garage rock organ-led sounds that kind of cut through his mixes.
Yeah, unmistakable. And then on the, let's say, more ambient side of things, you've got The Edge from U2. He used it quite a bit for layering shimmer and these ambient organ textures into his already complex soundscapes, just adding another layer of depth to tracks that already felt huge.
Right. And even someone maybe more experimental like Nils Klein from Wilco. He used the POG2 not just for basic organ sounds, but for really pushing it into ethereal textures, messing with the low-pass filter and detune to get sounds that are hard to even describe. So it really is or was a genre-agnostic kind of sound tool. It found a home everywhere.
That list of users definitely proves this wasn't just some niche digital gimmick pedal. It was a defining professional tool for serious musicians who needed to push the guitar's sound beyond, just traditional tones.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, sort of a step back, we need to place the POG2 firmly within the Electro Harmonix legacy itself. It really stood out, and still does in a way, as their flagship polyphonic octave generator back then. EHX knew, of course, that not everyone needed that much control, or the presets. That's why they also brought out the simpler, streamlined micro POG around 2007, and then later the even tinier nano POG in 2014, I think. But the POG2 was always positioned as the one for the player who demanded the full flexible feature set and, crucially, that instant preset recall for live work.
So it was a really critical device for Electro Harmonix as a company too then. It helped define who they were becoming in the 2000s, showing they were investing heavily in, sophisticated digital engineering, not just relying on their classic analog past.
Absolutely. You could argue this device was critical to their reputation for maybe four main reasons. First, it refined that original POG concept from just a groundbreaking experiment into a truly reliable professional studio and stage tool. Second, the preset storage was a huge step for the digital pedals, making them competitive with bigger, more complex multi-effect units that were emerging. Third, it basically defined the sound of modern organ and synth emulation specifically for guitarists. It created a whole new sonic vocabulary for the instrument. And finally, and this is maybe the most important from a company perspective, it helped really cement EHX's reputation in the 2000s as a leader in new digital innovation. They weren't just seen as the company endlessly reissuing classic analog big muffs or memory man delays anymore. They were actively pushing the boundaries of what DSP could achieve.
And that innovation, that success, it must have rippled outward, influenced the whole pedal market, didn't it?
Oh, it absolutely did. The POG2 really set the benchmark for the kind of high-fidelity polyphonic pitch shifters we see today from, pretty much all the major competitors. And that specific, really lush texture you get by blending the octave up voices with that detune control, that is basically the origin story of what became known across the industry simply as the shimmer effect. That shimmer sound, which was popularized by the POG and then the POG2, it became a core concept. You saw it adopted later by companies like Boss, Eventide, TC Electronic, often in dedicated shimmer reverb pedals. The POG2 kind of proved the recipe for these beautiful, layered, atmospheric digital textures, establishing a new standard for sonic depth you could get from a relatively compact pedal.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you listening right now? Well, the POG2 essentially proved that a digital effect, when engineered really carefully thinking about things like high voltage headroom, adding expanded shaping controls like attack delay and a proper low-pass filter, and including that absolutely essential feature of onboard memory slots for presets, it could transform a simple octave effect into a genuinely stage-ready, synth-emulating instrument. It didn't just add extra voices, it created entirely new sound palettes for professional players, really across every genre imaginable.
Yeah, it really demonstrated that sophisticated digital signal processing could generate tones and textures that honestly transcended the old arguments about analog purity, especially when you tasked it with complex jobs like high-fidelity polyphony.
So here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Consider just how much modern music relies on effects, those seamless organ swells, the complex pitch shimmers you hear everywhere, the perfect octave stacking for massive riffs. Effects that, really just 2 decades ago, were considered either technically impossible to do well or just hopelessly glitchy and unusable in a simple stompbox format. Does the POG2 maybe represent that precise moment when musicians kind of stopped worrying so much about that tired old debate of digital versus analog and instead started fully embracing what only digital digital technology could make uniquely and musically possible, something to mull over until our next deep dive.